Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us this evening. My name is Sarah Elfreth, and I have the great privilege of representing Maryland's 3rd Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. And I'm joined by a very special guest today for an important and timely conversation. Now, we've had a series of these conversations over the last few weeks as there's been more and more uncertainty coming out of Washington, D.C. We've had our comptroller on talking about the importance of federal funding. We had our attorney general on talking about his work utilizing the court system to push back against some of this chaos. And we have received more so than anything else questions from both federal workers and folks who are impacted by the federal funding freeze or reductions in force of the federal workers, contractors, many questions about what resources are available to them. And I say this number probably 10 times a day, but the 3rd Congressional District of Maryland is home to 44,000 federal employees. Now, those are direct federal employees. We don't have the number of how many contractors are employed in the 3rd Congressional District, but just based on the 44,000, we can assume a few times more than that. And so thousands of you have reached out over the last 6 weeks with questions about where to turn to, eligibility for unemployment insurance, other resources available. And so we wanted to put together this issue-specific town hall, and I'll talk a little bit more at the end of this about other in-person events that we're working on as well, but really important, timely conversation. And I'm so thrilled to be joined by Maryland's Secretary of Labor, Secretary Wu. Thank you so much for taking the time this evening to chat with us. I really appreciate you being here. I'm going to give a quick intro because you have quite the impressive resume, and then I would love for you to share a few thoughts, and then we're going to dig into some Q&A. We got, like I said, thousands of questions in advance. We'll also be taking questions live, and so please feel free to utilize the comment section, and then Katie on my wonderful team will get those questions to me that I can pose as well. So let's jump in. Secretary Wu is incredibly experienced. You've spent your career developing and implementing the bipartisan force of 2015 programs and instituted new accountability and reporting measures. Before joining the Department of Labor, you served as a White House Domestic Policy Counsel, as Special Assistant and Senior Policy Advisor to President Barack Obama for Labor and Workforce from 2011 to 2014. And throughout your career, you have overseen federal programs providing employment services and job training opportunities for millions of Americans across this country. We are so lucky to have you here in Maryland running our State Department of Labor, which is the equivalent, state equivalent of the Federal Department of Labor, and fighting for Marylanders every single day. Secretary Wu, thank you. And please, if you'd like to share any opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Elfreth, and it's a delight to be here as a Marylander. I wish it were under better circumstances, obviously. Excuse me. I'll just start with some opening remarks, and then happy to answer any questions. First of all, I know this is just such a tough time for feds, and I really feel it. I'm from a federal family. Both my parents were career federal servants, and between the two of them, I want to say they spent probably about 60 years in federal service caring for sick and injured veterans. They were VA docs, and my sister-in-law is right here at NIH. My brother was at FDA. So we are really a Maryland family, but also a federal service family. And I spent 15 years in federal service myself. So I understand the passion that federal servants bring to their jobs and how committed they are and how devastating these actions have been. So I want to underscore, we're here for you at the Maryland Department of Labor. We have a number of resources. I'm happy to spend a little time ticking through those and then answer some questions if I could. First of all, for individuals who have lost their jobs, please apply for unemployment insurance. And the question I get a lot is people are getting different kinds of paperwork and they're saying, this says it was for my performance, even though I know it wasn't. What do I do? We'll take those on a case-by-case basis. So please go ahead and file. You should file in the place of your duty station, where your job is. So you live in Maryland, work in DC, file in DC, because that's frustrating to people if they walked in the wrong door. So we want you to start out in the right place. And I'd say we have a bunch of resources on the Maryland Department of Labor website, labor.maryland.gov/federal workers. We've already had over 30,000 people check out our resources there. We have a running list of local hiring fairs and other things. And we actually have a virtual workshop specifically for transitioning feds every Wednesday from 9 to 12. So our professional services outplacement unit. And it's, a lot of questions at, how do I translate my resume for the private sector, for example? We've had hundreds of people go through the workshop thus far. Governor Moore actually stopped in yesterday. So, that's a start. I'm happy to talk in more detail about what we're offering.
That is wonderful. I didn't know you did those Wednesday sessions. We are getting that question about, folks who might have spent their entire career and are suddenly without that career. How do they revamp their resume? How do they practice their interview skills? All those things. So I'm so grateful you're doing that Wednesday workshop. And we will, folks, we're going to include every link that we refer to in the chat and then in the post chat. We're going to do a whole separate post just with all the links so you have them. We also have a resource guide on my website that I'm sure Katie is linking to very shortly that has these resources, but also county specific resources. So really important to remember that our counties and the 3rd district circumstance, Anne Arundel County, Howard County, Carroll County, all have offices or departments of workforce development who are also prepared to help find jobs and prepare workers for a new career. And I don't ever want to lose sight, Madam Secretary, about how swiftly, in this case, DOGE is just ripping through the federal government. And in my view, without a plan, without strategy, we're hearing of mistaken firings every single day. People at the VA, people who were in charge of tracking and responding to avian flu, which is leading to increased egg prices at USDA, people ensuring that the safety and security of our nuclear weapons, people who were mistakenly fired by DOGE are reinstated. And the court system, of course, is working through a lot of these. We had a good win just the other day. So I would just say if you're a federal worker and you're impacted by DOGE's cuts, please talk to your union. Please see what resources are available to you. We work with a great group called Democracy Forward that is challenging many of these actions in court. And again, we're having good wins in the court system right now. We're going to link to all that as well. And you can see kind of your opportunities for appealing. But Madam Secretary, you mentioned a really good thing. A good point is that because these are happening so rapidly and a court just found happening unconstitutionally because the OPM, Office of Personnel Management, was responsible for these firings, particularly of probationary employees, and using the rationale of poor job performance in some circumstances when these employees had just received stellar job performance ratings. And so really important to note that utilize the rights that you have, appeal, make sure that you do apply for that unemployment insurance. You've spent your career paying into that system. It's here for you at that moment too. So I'm going to dig into questions after that long spiel. Linda from Mount Airy asked a question: are people who did contract work for the government and are they now eligible for unemployment insurance if they were not a direct federal employee but lost their jobs either because of the federal funding freeze or otherwise?
So anyone who's an employee is eligible for unemployment insurance. So for example, if you are employed by a federal contractor, just say USAID, a contractor, you're employed by a nonprofit or a contracting company and you've lost work now because your contract is dried up or been stopped, absolutely those individuals should be eligible for unemployment. If you're sort of a solo 1099, sometimes people are not, because unemployment is for people who are, generally speaking, are W-2 workers. But most of the federal contractors we're talking about are working for contracting firms. And so you would be eligible for unemployment insurance. And so first of all, if you have had a major layoff, we encourage those contractors to reach out to us at Department of Labor, notify us. We can provide what are called rapid response services, help a bunch of people file at once, and also provide other supports as you're doing a job search or trying to figure out what's next.
Okay. Kelly in the live comments asked what the comment was about filing in DC. Madam Secretary, can you take that one more time and maybe give an example for folks?
Sure, sure. And because we live in the DMV, this is such a common
Right.
circumstance. You might live in Prince George's County, but work in downtown DC. If that's the case, you should file at the place of your federal duty station. So you should file where you work, where your job was.
Right.
So file in DC, even though you live in Maryland. That can be confusing
Right.
to people.
Yeah. So, and if you live in Maryland and you work at Social Security Administration and your duty station is Maryland, file for unemployment insurance in Maryland. Now, also keep in mind if your duty station is in Virginia, because we have a lot of Marylanders who work in Virginia and vice versa, to file in the jurisdiction of your duty station. We've also tried to make that as clear as possible in our resource guide, but continue to please help us spread that word, because we don't want to see people file in the wrong jurisdiction, go days or weeks without a response and not knowing why. So we're just trying to save some headache. Okay. Stephen from Arnold asks, I am a federal employee who would like to know more about any resources available to me should my position be eliminated. Again, I can't tell you how many constituents I speak to on a daily basis who might still have a job, but are scared and anxious for what's next. So what advice would you have for them, Madam Secretary?
So I would certainly say check out the workshop that I referenced. That workshop, a lot of the people who are coming are just starting to look around and say, I just want to know what my options are, what the tools are. We understand you don't have to have lost your job to participate. And like I said, if you visit the department's website, labor.maryland.gov/federal workers, we have
Yeah.
a lot of job fair and recruiting events there as well. We're constantly updating it. We meet with all of the local workforce areas in our state every week, and we get information. Your local American Job Center, and Congresswoman, I'm sure you have the links to those on your
Yeah.
website as well. But your local American Job Center, you can just walk in anytime during the weekday. There will be people there to help you and provide advice.
Wonderful. And yes, we will include every link available repeatedly throughout this and in our post. Um, we did a question about the private sector being already saturated, and is finding a job even realistic anymore? And this is a really timely question. I serve on in the House. I serve on the House Armed Services Committee and the Natural Resources Committee. Just today, I met with folks in the private defense sector, and I asked them this question. And so the response is yes, there are available jobs out there. They're going to be a little bit, fair to assume, harder to find right now than maybe 6 weeks or 7 weeks ago, but there are available jobs. I've even asked a number of folks in the defense sector throughout Maryland if they would be willing to work with me on putting together a job fair. If that's something constituents are interested in my office hosting, please comment and say that that's something you would like us to put together for you. And we're happy. Again, my job is to be responsive, to be here for you on your hardest days, and to fight with every tool I have in Congress, fight back against these. Frankly, in my view, again, not strategic. They are not being very planning very well. These swift and frankly dangerous cuts we're seeing to the federal workforce, and we're already seeing the ripple effect across our economy. And so that's our next question. Marty from Annapolis asks, please explain the ripple effect of federal employee firings on Maryland in terms of everyday changes to Maryland lives and home economics, such as seniors, children, students, etc.
Thank you. Well, we haven't seen the ripples yet, but absolutely the comment and the question are spot on. Maryland has over about 250,000 Marylanders are working in federal civilians who live here in Maryland working in federal jobs. Probably about a similar number who are working for federal contractors. So in a workforce of about 3 million, it's a very significant number for our state. We fortunately haven't seen as many of the impacts yet, but I think we all sadly see the terrible news that is likely to come on the horizon. I want to echo the Congresswoman's comments. We have definitely, Governor Moore and Attorney General Brown, we are in this fight, and we have already joined many lawsuits, and we will try to stop these actions where we can and lift our voice to do that. But we understand that there will be impacts undoubtedly. And, these are high paying jobs. Most of the federal jobs in Maryland, many of them are over 100,000, between 100 and $200,000 a year. So when that income's lost, it's very hard for families and communities.
Yeah, we are absolutely going to see that ripple effect in our economy. And I think it's also important to note we're going to see a ripple effect in services delivered, or in this case, not delivered for the American people. So when Elon Musk talks about slashing the Social Security Administration drastically, that even though the president commits to not touching benefits for Social Security recipients, if we cut that workforce to the bone, we're not going to be able to see checks printed on time. We're not going to be to see appeals processed in time. We're not going to be able to see the number of our seniors, the number of folks with disabilities, children who have lost their parents. All of those applications will be slowed down. So you don't need to reduce benefits. You might be able to not reduce benefits, but if you do this, if the president decides to do this, it's very fair to say there will be a reduction in services for our constituents, and that's just Social Security. Let's talk about the FDA, and let's talk about the FAA. We all want to make sure. I'm getting on a plane tomorrow. We all want to make sure that we have confidence in the safety of air travel. We talk about people inspecting our meat every single day. When we talk about federal funding coming to our highways and roads and bridges and inspections, and the federal government and federal workforce literally touches every part of our lives. We just don't necessarily always think about it every moment of the day. But if we see such drastic and again, swift and unplanned for reductions in federal workforce, it's not just our district, it's not just our state that is going to suffer from the consequences and reduction in services. It's going to be nationwide. And so we can talk all day about finding efficiencies, but I would like to see a strategic, thoughtful plan moving forward instead of this frankly, sledgehammer to the federal workforce. Okay, back to questions from the audience. Patricia from Annapolis asked, will there be any job placement assistance or preference for hiring federal workers who have been fired? Is the state, or do we know of any local governments who are placing a preference for hiring of those fired federal workers?
Well, thank you. Governor Moore just signed a memo last week directing our Department of Budget and Management, so our state version of OPM, to look into finding a way to, expedite the hiring of federal workers. We have systems, we have other preferences in place already, but I do know, as was referenced earlier, job fairs are very popular now. We are making sure we do have many jobs open in state government. We are cooperating with local and county government. And the good news is Maryland's economy is actually still very tight. We have more jobs than people who are ready and available to work. So there are still jobs open, but making sure we find a match and connect people with those opportunities. I in my agency have already hired a number of people who have left federal service. So, we're all trying to do our part.
That's great. And yes, Governor Moore just announced last week that effort, and I'm really grateful to him of confronting this head on and trying his best to provide every resource for so many federal employees who live in our district. So thank you to you, Madam Secretary, and his leadership in recognizing that these are great candidates for state service, great candidates for local government service, and we should do our best to get those folks employed and still in public service. And another great time to remind folks that I don't think I've ever met a single civil servant, my parents included, who ever did it for the money. Many, if not entirely, our civil servants do it because they want to support their community. They want to serve their nation. And so these are really passionate, capable, hardworking people that just want to serve their community. And so thank you for that effort. Carol from Annapolis, what steps is our state taking to ensure that federal workers, including those impacted, have timely access to unemployment benefits and additional support services? So for folks who weren't at the top of this and maybe tuned in a little later, Madam Secretary, can you just reiterate the unemployment insurance opportunity? And can you actually speak a little bit about what that benefit looks like currently?
Absolutely. So if you are filing for unemployment insurance in Maryland, so you work in Maryland, that would mean our current maximum weekly benefit is $430 a week. So I will admit it is quite modest. That is the amount that's set under statute currently. For federal employees, go on to the Maryland Labor website. There's a place you can file online. If that doesn't work for you, you can go into one of the 33 American Job Centers around the state. People can assist you there in person. One issue that I'll just talk about a couple common issues that people sometimes find they have some difficulty with is unfortunately during the pandemic there was a lot of fraud, and sometimes people's identities were stolen, and so you'll run into a roadblock saying there's something wrong with your account or you filed for unemployment before and it turned out to be fraudulent. This happens to a lot of people, they didn't even know what happened to them.
Yeah.
Going to a job center, they can fix it for you, or call us on the phone. We will walk you through that to help you verify your ID but get through those roadblocks. It can take a little while, and in part, we need to hear back from the federal government. They are supposed to send us forms to confirm your wages and employment. It's a little bit uneven right now, I will
Okay.
say, in the response from federal agencies. I would direct you, but make sure you have your SF-50. Make sure you have a copy of a recent pay stub. Get your documents together and have them, and you can share them with us. We will find a way to prove it, even if we don't hear back from your agency. It could take a little longer and need a few more steps. So get your documents together.
Okay.
I'd say.
Madam Secretary, that brings up a burning question that I have. So before I was elected to Congress last year, I served in the Maryland State Senate for 6 years, and served during the pandemic where, frankly, under the last administration, I'm in state. I was in state service. I can freely admit when mistakes were made. The state was not prepared for the amount of unemployment insurance claims that occurred during the pandemic, and folks were waiting a very, very long time for many reasons. My office, that was the number one issue my office worked on. I think we helped about 1,500 constituents navigate that UI process, and some didn't have the correct paperwork. Some there was just a bottleneck. Some, to your point, there had been flagged for fraud through no fault of their own. Can you speak a little bit about, since you've become secretary post-pandemic and a new governor, a new administration, can you talk about a little bit of the lessons learned from that experience and how the department is preparing for possibly what's ahead?
Absolutely. And I wasn't here during the pandemic, but we're still feeling the after effects, honestly. Maryland went to, during that time, a virtual filing system, which still working out the kinks. It could be better. A couple lessons we've learned, though. First of all, sadly, the fraud problem is a real one. And so we have adopted some online tools. If you have a smartphone or tablet, you can use those to confirm your ID. If that doesn't work or you don't have a smart device, you can go to an American Job Center. You can go to a post office. So we've put those things in place because we saw that was a real bottleneck for people.
Right.
Also, I've really pushed to try to have more people do some of those in-person services. And especially if we get notice that there's been a mass layoff, for example, at a federal agency, we can go on site and help people there locally. We're happy to coordinate with members of Congress or local electeds to provide those services in person, because there are a host of reasons people get bottlenecked. Sometimes they don't realize their employer agency sent some other documentation that's held things up, and so we can walk it through with them. Those are the lessons I have to say we really learned. Online tools are great, but people often need person-to-person services, and we will do our best to provide them.
If I can take, I'm going to take 30 seconds for an anecdote. It was probably the most frustrating moment of 6 years in the state Senate, on the phone with, again, some folks from Department of Labor in the past administration, where my constituents just could not get through. And people might remember, I mean, the phone lines were just inundated, impossible, and then we did not have enough employees answering the phone. But I got in a bit of an argument about that online ability to verify. This is right at the beginning of the pandemic, and not everybody had a laptop at home, and libraries were closed, and folks just could not file properly using their phone. And we got in a bit of a back and forth, but I'm so glad that you were able to learn that really important lesson and pivot, so that people who might not have that laptop at home can still do a lot of the filings from their smartphone or tablet. I didn't know that, and I'm very proud and thankful to you. Thank you. Lawrence is, I'm getting this in real time, said, I hear there are cuts, major cuts proposed for the Veterans Administration. As a user of VA services in Baltimore, is there any estimate of impact on services? Lawrence, this is keeping me up at night, if I can be totally honest. All of the cuts across the board, again, without any type of strategy or assurance that services can continue, the services that American people pay into and expect from the federal government. And so we just heard yesterday the figure of 80,000 of our federal workers who work in the VA serving our veterans, serving the people who dedicated their lives to literally keeping us safe. Our 80,000 are proposed to be cut because of DOGE's cost savings. And we knew already that the backlog at VA that already existed, I would argue that's a department that does not have nearly enough federal workers to fulfill their important mission, life-saving mission, again, for our veterans. And so that's the proposal that we heard yesterday. I can promise you that I will fight with every fiber of my being to make sure that doesn't happen, because Maryland is not just home to a lot of federal employees, we're home to many veterans. I represent the U.S. Naval Academy and tremendous amount of veterans in Anne Arundel, Howard, and Carroll County. And so those cuts to the workforce would be devastating to services. I just don't think there's any way around that. AI can't fill the void of those federal workers when it comes to the VA. Okay, so we're gonna, Madam Secretary, we're gonna wrap up here. One more live question: can Marylanders collect severance and unemployment simultaneously?
It depends on the details, actually.
Okay.
So it can, because there are limitations to the amount of other income you can receive while you're on unemployment, because it's made to replace, lost income. It can impact your unemployment. I will say another important thing sometimes people don't realize is you have to be able and available to work to collect unemployment. So sometimes, and this can be tricky for feds, you're saying, well, I just got put on leave, administrative paid leave. It's unclear what's happening. If you still have that job, it's actually premature to file for unemployment because you're still in the job. Or, I got 6 weeks severance. I was told I didn't have to come to the office, but technically I'm still on the payroll and they're just paying me out on leave status. Like, you actually still are in that employee status. So you can inquire about that.
Okay, excellent question. And I don't think it would hurt to have all the documents that the secretary laid out earlier ready, just in case something happens. And so, Madam Secretary, I really appreciate the time and the expertise and your career's work in standing up and supporting workers in the private and the public sector. I'm just so grateful to have you at the helm of our Maryland Department of Labor, and grateful for your time. If you want to say any closing words, and then I'm going to wrap us up here.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I would just say again, it's really tough to be in this situation for all of us. I understand how hard things are, and we will do our very best to serve and support you. You have a governor who believes in service, right? We understand the value of public service. So we want to support people in this really difficult time. And if they're not able to keep their jobs and stay where they want to be, let's find other places to serve in our state. And we want to be here to support you through all of this. And thank you, Congresswoman, for your leadership. We're always here to be a resource to you and your team as well.
I appreciate that. And Katie's watching the live stream for me. I'm not sure if we got a question about what I am doing in Congress. And so I just want to take 60 seconds and talk about that. So I am a member of the Democratic Party, which means I am in the minority, 215 versus 217. But I'm still filing, co-sponsoring and sponsoring legislation. I will be introducing my first bill on Tuesday, actually related to federal workers, and really proud that we already have bipartisan support for that bill. We're going to announce it on Tuesday. But I am filing, co-sponsoring legislation. I am working with our federal unions every single day. We talk to AFSCME or NTAU. We are also filing amicus briefs in the court system as well. So while in the minority party, I can't bring a bill to a hearing or bring a bill out of committee to the floor for a vote without 3 of my Republican colleagues joining me, we are still doing all of these other efforts, including being in the community. So if folks would like us to host a job fair, I'm here to serve you. We will happily put that together. We're going to continue to do these online town halls and listening sessions and discussions because it's really easy if I'm in Washington or I'm back in district where I am right now. It's easy to get out to a lot of people. But we heard you. We're also doing an in-person town hall this Tuesday, March 11th in Howard County with Senator Chris Van Hollen, Senator Angela Alsobrooks, County Executive Calvin Ball. That's going to be at Howard Community College on Tuesday, March 11th. I hope you can join us. It's at 7:30. There's probably 500 or 600 seats available. So we would love for you to join us, where we're there to listen to the community, communicate everything that we are doing in Congress, communicate all the resources that are available to you. And I will end on that note that there are many resources brought to you from Secretary Wu at the Maryland Department of Labor and Governor Wes Moore. We have a resource guide on our website that we will link. We will link Department of Labor. We'll also link our resource guide, which has much more than just resources for federal employees. We have resources for other communities that may be impacted by the president's action. So I ask you to go online and see that. If you are in need of support, please call my office. We are here to work for you. You can also follow a lot of our work ahead at Rep. Sarah Elfreth on all platforms now. So please stay tuned for our work. And we're just going to continue every single day to listen, to learn, to fight. Please know that it's the privilege of my life to represent you in Congress, even on the toughest days. And I'm grateful to each and every one of you for taking the time tonight. Madam Secretary, I'm really grateful for you. Thank you for taking time in the evening to talk about this. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. We're going to share all your resources, not just tonight, but we're going to continue to share those resources as we head into the future. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and I will see you in person on Tuesday or back here online very shortly for our next version of this virtual town hall. Thank you.
Thank you.